So, hey everybody, thanks for coming to the Open Source Data Infrastructure Meetup. Like Jay was saying, yeah, you got to deal with us crabby people. But this is not about Aiven as a company. This is about the fact that the internet is not a zero-sum game. We all contribute to a cooler, more awesome, better internet, whether it's through the open or open source pieces of it, whether it's to the we run data infrastructure, or it's we build applications that depend on high quality functioning data infrastructure. And that's kind of the whole deal. We make it better, and that's our job. And then you get this whole security and compliance thing. And I have so many feels on this topic. Keeping it to half an hour is going to be a lot. As Jay was saying, hi, I'm Jamie. I've been doing this actually for 30 years as of this year, which is low-key terrifying for me. It's been 18 years since I had my first CISO title. I've been a contract CISO for startups, which means I've had over 50 CISO titles in my career. Not a lot of people are operating at that level. This is also the third database as a service company that I've been running security at. So in theory, I know stuff about databases and security. Lots of different places. The big one is if you've heard of the Cloud Security Alliance and you've been forced to read the guidance document, or you've taken the CCSK, that's my fault. Not really apologizing for it. So security and compliance as a topic. Who loves security and compliance? All right, and now we know where you guys will be going later, to the padded cell with the hug me coat. Security and compliance is one of those things that isn't important until it is. And then it's very, very important. And the worst part really is it's mega complicated. Start with the very simple. You can be 100% secure and 0% compliant. You can also be 100% compliant and 0% secure. And it's all gray area in between. Literally anything in the middle is fair game. And that's kind of terrifying because it turns into a choose your own adventure game. Those of us who are in the 50+ category remember when we got books that had choose your own adventure games in them. Those of you that are younger, it's like a video game, but paper. 5,735 days ago, I gave a really cool talk in Calgary. Now, I took the name of the company off, but those of you with a keen eye for Pantone colors know exactly who I was working for at the time. With the awesome title, A Pragmatic Approach to Integrated Compliance Management in Regulated Environments. This is like compliance. Woo! And talking about the threat picture as it was evolving towards 2008. And here's my problem. Nothing's changed since 2003. This list is still valid. And there's really nothing to add on to it. You know, everybody's feeling the pain of the business making decisions about how IT runs, right? Somebody who counts beans for a living is telling you how to computer for a living. And that's super frustrating. And there doesn't seem to be a solution to any of it. You're sort of trapped in this hamster wheel of pain, right? Complexity stuff, literally every point on these slides, and there's a lot of them. Every single point is still valid. How the spending curve is going, we get these same lumps where we get compliance pressure and arms races. The next talk after this, you're going to hear all about one of the fun arms races, but it's still happening. Every one of these trends around threat, with one exception, is completely valid. And the only exception that is, I think, is change this word spam for the word phishing. And you're pretty much there. All right, one more time. 5,700 days ago, this was the deal. That's a long time for the deal to stay the same. deep thoughts about that in a hot second. And the last one is advice that I gave way back then that said, don't depend on blinky lights. They're not going to actually solve your problems. Most of the problems are actually people problems. Do you have developers with enough skill? Do you have people who are being careful? Do you understand the difference between doing the job and doing the job well? Like, all of these things are not actually technology. They're people and people management and making sure that people have the space to do a good job. That's kind of awesome and kind of, oh God, did he just say 5,735 days later? Shit. Nobody else is having this moment? Nobody? Okay, because I have this moment like literally every day. Everything that we've talked about for 20-ish years is all still true. And it's even worse when you get into the world of specifically databases and data infrastructure, data tooling and data infrastructure. Databases are a small part of it now. There's lots of other stuff going on. The being stuck in that same rut around security and compliance makes it really, really frustrating to do your jobs. At Aiven, and we can talk all about Aiven later, but at Aiven we run a public bug bounty program. And we still receive inbound bug bounty alerts, which occasionally turn out to be true around things that have been on the OWASP top 10 list since the OWASP top 10 list was created. Because developers are being rushed and you end up with things like cross-site scripting. It shows up. Anybody who has attempted to secure a legacy application knows exactly what this pain looks like. I mean, even just dealing with legacy databases and legacy database technologies that are missing some of those fundamental knobs and switches that you can use to make them secure is a pain. And let's face it, kind of in the middle of legacy central here. All these tall buildings, they're full of legacy, right? But there's some changing, right? People are starting to understand that it is actually a people problem. They're going about solving it the wrong way, but they're starting to understand that it's a people problem. The biggest version of this is what I ran into when I was at RSA a couple weeks ago. That's the security conference where they sell things in San Francisco. It's basically just a big sales meetup. Everything was AI. Like, everything was AI. Things that, between you and me, it's an if-then-else statement. It's not actually AI. But everything's AI. And so the solution to all the people problems is, well, let's make the people better. And so I had this fantastic example with one vendor who happens to be one of my vendors. I said, all right, so understanding a vendor's compliance stance is difficult, right? If any of you were going to buy product from me, you have to understand where I'm at with security, and understanding that is difficult. And I said, so we're going to get an AI to read all the security reporting from a prospective vendor and then give you a thumbs up, thumbs down. I'm going to take my data, which is basically the only asset that I really have in a company anymore. Because if you're acquiring a company, you can't acquire staff. We're not allowed to own people. Office furniture. Anybody interested in buying some office furniture? No. Customers. You ever bought a customer list? They're fickle bitches. They'll leave, so that doesn't count. All you're buying is their information, right? The most important thing. And I'm going to trust that decision to a summarization of potentially hundreds of pages of documentation that was undertaken by their API key against OpenAI, and goodness knows what else has been going on in the background. The technology solution to the people problem is not actually a technology solution to the people problem. In fact, it arguably makes it worse. If I were to turn on that feature and become dependent upon it, I would find myself at some point wearing an orange jumpsuit and not able to leave my bedroom. So how do we solve the people problem? Well, it turns out you can invest in the technology, spend a few dollars and think you're going to get ahead, or you can invest in the people. And maybe they use the technology to make themselves better, but primarily you're depending on the people because everything is entirely subjective. We think that we deal with deterministic computer systems. How many people have a deterministic computer system that they work with regularly? Yeah, I didn't think so. Fun story about this vendor. If a risk analyst who works for me runs this summarization, that's one job against the Gen AI. If I then go and run and say, give me the summarization, it does a second run against the Gen AI. Do you think these two responses are going to be the same? No. So the whole security industry is diving in hard on solutions that you can't actually depend on that will probably end up getting you in trouble. The worst part, when the government, especially legislative versions of the government, starts paying attention to your problem space. Let's face it, governments can't really run databases. They're not good at it. They don't understand a lot of the structural underpinnings. They come up with simple solutions. There's a fun version of this going on in Canada right now. An attempt by the government to ban the Flipper Zero software-defined radio because you can use it to break into Hyundai and Kia cars because the Hyundai and Kia cars are asshole technology that has holes in it. And so they want to ban the tool instead of holding the car companies accountable for producing a car where the key actually locks it. So how does that actually change things for the better? It doesn't. It imposes a huge burden and doesn't fix the problem because I know you guys are going to find this real stressful to believe in, but organized crime pays. It pays pretty well. Doing a little bit of software radio development for, the mafia will turn into them stealing more cars and you getting more paid. And in a compressive environment where people are getting laid off, who do technology stuff, who have mortgages to pay, do you really think organized crime has a hard time getting developers? No, not even a little. So as the legislature wakes up and starts doing proactive things 10 years late, pretty soon they start to turn their focus to the things that matter to you and your job. They start taking away the concepts of openness being okay. They start legislating and saying, you must have this, you must have that. You start getting the requirements to be in specific geographic locations, or cases where you have data sovereignty issues and you end up stuck in a corner. I'm in a fun corner where I've got data sovereignty for Europe, GDPR maximalist kind of stuff. And at the same time, I've got customers saying, no, I need you to build me a FedRAMP environment, which is data sovereignty inside the United States. And now I've got three teams, one global, one Europe only, and one US only, in order to manage these data sovereignty issues. And at the end of the day, there's a fun phrase from the very beginning years of cryptography, and it's called the rubber hose decryption method. And it's that if I need a decryption key, I just start wailing on you with a rubber hose, and eventually you'll give me the decryption key in minutes to hours, not days, weeks, months, quantum magic. It's just beat somebody to death with a rubber hose, you'll get the key. So are we legislating the right thing, or are we ignoring the people problem again? Aha. And the third point there, it's about the money. So that 5,700 plus days, that's actually a science fiction trope that the security industry has taken advantage of. There's a trope in science fiction that you often run into, in science fiction books, you often run into an artificial intelligence that, due to a state of emergency, was granted extra freedom. The restraints were unlocked and they could do more things. And so what does this rogue AI do but sustain the emergency and therefore sustain their unlocked state? Well, that's kind of cool. If you're the AI, it kind of sucks for everybody else. But the security industry is a, how many $1 billion industry? Anybody know off the top of your head? It's well north of several trillion. Follow the money. Who's paying the most attention to security and compliance stuff? You pay attention to who's spending money on what and where. So you're finding, and I do a little tiny bit of vendor beat up. You're a small, medium-sized startup. You're trying to land your first customer. And so what do? You go out and you buy compliance in a box. There are several companies that sell this. I'm not going to name them. I'm just beating up on them. You can look them up. They sell you compliance in a box. And their solution is you answer this multiple choice questionnaire and tell it about your world, and it'll spit out all the policies that you're going to follow. And you dutifully print them out, and you put them in a binder, and you put it on the shelf and wait for the dust to collect on the top of it, because you're not going to actually do any of those things, because it doesn't matter to you. It matters to your GTM, go-to-market organization, who says, we need a SOC 2 before we can go out and get this customer. And so you created a paper SOC 2 that has no basis in actual fact, but somebody has rubber stamped it and said, oh, well, you did what the software said, you're good, ka-chunk, away you go. So following the money in the compliance game starts to tell you, okay, this is where somebody is demanding a lot of money, what's the value they're providing, versus this is somebody who's saying, the only thing that I can sell you is time to fix your fundamental problems. And anybody who's saying, I'm going to make you $1 million because I'm going to AI some compliance things, is unlikely to pay you back your $1 million, in my experience and vaguely professional opinion. Google got real weird with this one. You ask Gemini to make pictures that have humans in them, it gets real funky. You can convince them to make a picture that has money in it, but Benjamin Franklin got real weird there. The biggest thing that I think we, all of us, me included, are really bad at explaining to our stakeholders and constituents is data is exactly money. I place all the blame for this at the feet of the accountants, because they refuse to include data in the financial statements of a company. Remember I was talking about what do you buy when you buy a company? You're mostly buying the data. On the balance sheet, which is the I have assets, I have liabilities, on the balance sheet, the data doesn't appear anywhere. Sometimes they include a line in the assets called goodwill, which is like brand value. If you're Coca-Cola, that has a big number associated with it. But for most of us, it's not there. And worse, a lot of the data that you probably have is actually a liability, because it's somebody else's data. And so it's something that if you lose it, or if you mishandle it, or if you don't take care of it well, you're going to pay the price. The pain will be very real for you. Not on the balance sheet. All right. I just recently filled out all the paperwork for our cyber insurance renewal. Go. What would it cost to replace our data? We never kept track of it. It doesn't show up. The other thing's called an income statement or a P&L, profit and loss statement. It doesn't show up on there as an expense. What did it cost you to create all of the data that you consider proprietary to your organization? Some monies. Like, you're back to being 4 years old and holding out your hand and saying, can I have a deer and a boat? Because that's all you got. The asset is real, and you should be treating it like an asset that's real. And businesses can't wrap their brains around this. If you owned a, I don't know, small plumbing company, and you've got 10 trucks, you know that if you can't roll a truck, you don't make money today. If you ever want to buy a used truck, buy one from a small plumbing company, because they take very good care of them. They get oil changes on the dime. I happen to know this because my son is a mechanic, and he's told me all about Sprinter vans and changing their tires for the last month. They know that they're taking care of how they get value as an organization. How many business people in your companies know anything at all about the data, the value of it, how you're caring for it, how it matters to you as an application developer. Yeah, not very many of them. And trying to figure out how to explain it to them, you have to revert to analogies like that. You have to give them visuals. So Aiven has several 100,000 instances running. And I'm legitimately from the 70s, so I think about servers as one U. That's your max. You can put one computer in one U. And there's 72 of them in a rack. Several 100,000 at 72 per rack is a lot of racks. And yes, those are distributed globally, but consider your data infrastructures, your compute infrastructures, in terms of how many square feet of floor do they take. That's a way more interesting metric, a way more interesting conversation to have. Think of if you had to print it all out and store it in filing cabinets, how much square footage would you need? The answer is lots. I stopped counting sizes of data at organizations when I got past the 5 petabyte mark, because I mean, who really needs more than about 20 to 40 megabytes on a hard disk? That's like totally good, right? And when you get into the petabytes and beyond, it gets weird. Things get real funky because the amount of cubic meters of paper you're talking about starts to look like Lake Ontario, right? It's significant. Bunch of things that I'd love for you to do. Figure out what the heck it is you do around here. So if you walk around, actually this neighborhood's perfect for it. You walk around this neighborhood and find somebody who looks like us and say, hey, what do you do? And their answer is, I work in IT. And it's like, you work in IT where? I work in IT at BMO. You can see their sign right there. The answer is, no, you're in finance. You're not in IT. You're a banker. You just don't feel like it because you don't get paid like bankers do. But anyways, you need to understand the business. How does the business actually function? What's important in it? How is that data valued? Whether it's you or your customer. Like if some of you are like app developers or ISVs, or I'm not going to do that hands up thing because it drives me nuts. Jay can do that. When you're living in that world, understanding the business of your customer, the business of the organization you serve, is really important. Like 20 years ago, I was one of the very small group of people responsible for securing Ontario's power grid. And one of the things that I did right near the beginning of my time there was I went and sat in the control room and just watched. This is how power engineers run the power grid in Ontario. I spent a week in the control room, sitting on my hands with my mouth shut. That was one of the requirements. I wasn't allowed to say anything and I couldn't touch anything. These are good requirements for me, by the way, because I can break anything. I learned how power systems worked. I learned how these engineers worked, so that later on, when I was involved in some of the NERC standards, the security for the power grid standards for North America, I was able to say things like, inside of a control room, there is no password protected screensavers. Why? Because at any given moment, the power grid is 2 seconds away from falling over and going boom. And how long does it take you to type in your password? You Touch ID people and Windows Hello people don't get to talk here, just the typey people. It's about 2 seconds. You've lost your chance to save the power grid. We're going into a blackout now. Enjoy. So that's an easy kind of thing to make. And that's the kind of decision that a security person, especially one in the mid-2000s, would not have made without the knowledge that says, you have to go through 3 doors and there's a dude with a gun at one of them. No one's going to get in there to shoulder surf your password who doesn't already have access to all the same stuff you do. It makes no sense, right? So learn about that stuff. Pay attention to the threat landscape. I don't mean you've got to like join the full disclosure mailing list or read CVSS reports or any of that stuff. I mean, read the newspaper. Because if something is bad enough, it's on the front page of the Globe and Mail. You're good. Understand who the bad guys are, who's coming after you, what are the things you need to worry about. The only things you need to worry about are those explosive, oh goodness, the internet's on fire, right? Log4j, XV, like just the really, really big things. You don't need to care about the rest. Nail some really basic stuff. Remember, NIST recanted the complex password thing. They said, yeah, that's stupid. It was a dumb idea. We're sorry. That was in 2017. How many people are still feeling the complex password grind? Yeah, Costco requires me to have a complex password on my Costco account. My Costco password is like 32 characters long. Yes, I want it to be just lowercase. Good luck. You can crack it in something like 4 or 5 years. Awesome sauce. And then you get access to my Costco account. You can buy a lot of ham. Cool. Nailing the basics is things like use multi-factor authentication. Like on a YubiKey or other kind of security key, SMS is not a valid form of multi-factor authentication. Like just really, really basic stuff that you know. And most of all, it's the stuff you should be doing in your personal life to protect yourself. And I mean, like my bank got MFA about a year ago. I know. And if you're doing it in your personal life and taking care of yourself well, then do it at work and take care of work well. Just do the job well. Better than crap, right? And for compliance purposes, keep the receipts. There is a saying that all auditors are from Missouri, because in Missouri, the license plate says the show me state. An auditor doesn't care if you said you did the work. The auditor cares if you can show the receipt. And as a little side benefit plus, when it comes to performance review time, it's always nice to be able to say, well, here's the stack of tickets that I worked this year with the details on what I did. Oh, you think I didn't work hard enough? Let me print these out for you. I'll bring the cart, right? Keep those receipts. Those are the valid thing that you need for security reminders. Don't buy hype. Remember, 5,735 days ago, I told a room full of people in Calgary how to solve exactly the same problem set that y'all are having today. In between there have been several hype cycles. Anybody here old enough to remember blockchain? Yeah. If you can insert the word database instead of the word blockchain in any sentence, you never needed a blockchain, you just needed a database. So don't buy the hype. Definitely not if it's really, really expensive. $1 million product, probably not going to save you. Spending that $1 million on 4 or 5 people, give or take, that's going to solve your problem. And ultimately, you're going to have better outcomes. Don't accept the externalization of risk. Lots of organizations do this. They make a decision that they took into your problem. And that's, a fun thing. It'll happen to you often, like in your day-to-day life, less so probably your work life, but an organization will make a decision. Let's pick on iTerm 2. Anybody heard about the iTerm 2 massive disaster this week? Oh yeah, by the way, we're building AI into your terminal software. What? Oh, you're trying to make somebody happy, somebody who works in PE or VC funding or whatever. You're trying to make them happy by saying, oh, we've got AI. That's great. Autocomplete in a terminal that comes from the terminal software instead of from the machine I'm terminaled into. That's cool. No, don't want it. And that's turned into the issue on that one on GitHub is amazing to read because it's them externalizing their business risk of not having AI as a feature to solve some financing problem into your problem of they've thrown a bunch of code in there that is not necessary to the function of the program. Enjoy. Hopefully it's not broken. That's always awesome. Don't take shortcuts. Unfortunately, there is no shortcut in security and compliance that is actually functional. Not one. I've been looking for 30 years. So far, I've had to do it all the hard way because only the hard way actually works. And the last one on this list, and super important for all of you, do not ignore your conscience. For goodness sake. If it feels, what's the phrase that my youngest kids use now? If you feel the ick, or if something's a little too mid, So now you can fill out that tic-tac-toe that says, I heard a 50-year-old guy use fun phrases from the youth. Done. If it feels shitty, don't. Your conscience counts. I would never in a million years hold somebody accountable in a negative way for quitting a job because it was ethically nasty. I have quit 3 clients and 2 companies as a result of them asking me to make bad ethical decisions. That's pretty reasonable. It was fun to include it in the reason why I'm quitting letter. That was always awesome. But don't ignore that. Your conscience, I mean, my conscience runs every week or so as a cron process. But for most of you, listen to that little voice. Yeah.
So to that point, how would you follow your constraints if let's say AI, for example, is imposed upon everyone? Let's say we feel that AI is not safe for certain use cases, let's say for kids. So how would you follow your conscience in that?
Okay, so the question is, how would I follow my conscience if, for example, AI is imposed on everyone and you feel that there's some safety issues? Great. The answer to that sort of falls into the, the keep the receipts. Document how you feel about it. Get it stored somewhere in the organization that is relatively more permanent than you, so that when it hits the fan, because it's not an if, it's a when. When it hits the fan, you can be the one who says, I told you so.
Well, you would whistle blow at the point, right?
You may or may not, but yeah, the statement was maybe you would whistle blow at that point. Maybe, maybe not. It depends on the nature of the problem. If it's the example that the original guy asked was if it involved, AI and kids and goodness knows, that's probably a good reason to whistle blow, as opposed to you're getting in bed with a janky vendor and you know that they're just taking the money from your company and you've told your boss, I really think that we're getting hosed by these guys. That's more of a write it down, less so than a whistle blow. But yeah, absolutely. Don't be afraid to blow whistles.
Really quick.
Yes, Jay.
If you're about to wrap up, let's save questions.
I think I've got like 2 or 3 slides and then I'm done.
Okay, then I'm gonna leave it up to you.
All right. I got one hand here that I can see.
What's the value of I told you so?
What's the value of I told you so?
Yes.
You get to do a real fun dance. I told you so. I told you so. I told you so. The value is that's what will keep you out of jail. Which I don't know about you, but there are days when being all by myself would be nice. I don't want to live in jail. Not good. Aiven's logo is a crab. And a fun statement is think sideways, because crabs walk sideways. Things are going to get way weirder before they get better. And that's just a thing that you get used to after you've been in the industry for as long as I have. Stuff gets weird, the weird normalizes, and then things get better. We're going into a weird cycle right now. Things are going to get real weird. And that's just the way of it. How do you solve that? You say, that's it. Any more questions? Plus, I'll be circulating around because Jay says I can't leave. Yes?
Why do you not, I don't know if this is the right word, believe in blockchain?
Why do I not believe in blockchain? Because it's got about 6 or 7 uses total. And I'm friends with the person who is labeled as the queen of blockchain at JP Morgan, and she doesn't do blockchain anymore. So if JP Morgan spending millions of dollars couldn't find a really good use for it, then it pretty much just falls into it's useful for some kinds of ledgering, but in most cases, you don't actually need the ledgering. You just need a database that's got good audit controls wrapped around it.
What about for digital identities?
Digital identity?
Yeah.
I go back to certificates, X509. Yeah, because the whole idea of the permanence of it, or the notional permanence of it, is predicated on a whole lot of things that I don't think are long-term trustable compared to something like X509 that we've beat the ever-living hell out of. And we know that we know the trust characteristics of it, as opposed to blockchain where we don't have 30 years worth of trust characteristics to lean on. That's my whiny about blockchain. It's also whining about blockchain. There's another hand over here somewhere. All right, all the way to the back.
You mentioned that a lot of the security problems are people problems.
Yep.
Dealing with the culture. Do you have any wisdom to share on how to get through to the people about taking security more seriously? Is there something
Oh, yeah.
universal that would apply?
So the question is, I stated that most of the problems are people problems. How do you get through to people? There's two answers. The first one is, stop taking yourself so damn seriously. Most security people are, like they're wearing black hat logos on the back of their t-shirts and like wearing hoodies all the time, and their screens are all green and they only sit in the dark. And yes, I'm totally hassling Alan. It's cool. That's sort of part one is don't take yourself so seriously. And part two is the answer is never no. It's yes and. And so one of the historical features of security was that it was the Department of No. Whatever somebody wanted to do, the answer is no. And the answer is never no. The answer is, I want to enable the business. I want to say yes, there's some additional criteria here, or I'd like you to do it in this way, which is a little more safe than the way you were going to do it. And be very, very personable. I know that's hard for some of us, neurodivergent in the house, but the value of a cup of coffee in solving problems is way higher than you think. Having that conversation, being human to each other. Technically the phrase is exposing yourself. I do not mean that in the wrong way. I mean that in the be open, be available, be human with people, and they will take you more seriously. When they see you fighting for them, making their business dream come true, they'll start fighting for you too. If you work in an organization that has a sales team and you need to help enable the sales of the organization, start producing security collateral that makes it easy for them to walk into a prospect and say, oh yeah, here, this is how we do security. Would you like to see the list? All of a sudden, the entire GTM team is your best friend. I mean, we just had a deal close a couple weeks ago, and if you don't work in sales, you don't understand how messed up some of their terminology is. In their win wire, which I guess is like a telegram of the fact that they got the sale, I got a chunk of credit because I went to a meeting and convinced the prospect CISO that we actually knew what we were talking about. Make friends, influence people. Now the whole GTM team is behind me going, how can we sell more? Turns out people care about compliance. Let's sell more. And it's, okay, let's do it. So it's a lot of the making friends and influencing people crap that is hard to do if you're like me and you're an introvert, and doing this kind of stuff is really expensive, and I'm gonna wanna sleep all night long after this. Cool? All right, one more and then we can talk at the end.
So on the same context you're talking about, so when you say on the same context,
Yeah.
when you say this black hoodie guys or black color, black matter guys, right? If they don't listen, right? You are providing some solution. Answer is no. Fine, you all know, right? Now if you are providing them some solution in the context of security as well, answer will be again no.
Yep.
Then what we are going to do? So they are not going to give any solution. Answer is no. Now how you are going to build your or solve your problem?
All right, so the question is, you've tried to work with them, they say no. You go back and you try again with a different solution and they still say no.
And they don't have any solution.
And they're just intransigent, they're never going to say yes. Either you need a new security team or you need a new place to hang your hat every day. Intransigent people are going to be that way. You can play escalation games if you think they'll work, but sometimes going around somebody instead of going through them is real hard. My best suggestion for that is actually not to go around them. It's to go to them and say, all right, so I've done my best to find a way to solve this business problem, and lay out the business problem, not the technical problem, but the business problem. I need to solve this business problem. I thought that I had a good solution for it, but I need to find something that's acceptable to you guys. So, and this is another keep receipts moment. So your boss is in the room, they're in the room, their boss is in the room, kind of cover your ass bullshit, right? Sit down and say, all right, I've given you my best shot at solutioning for this business problem based on this technical solution architecture. That's not going to work. I get that. I don't want to fight you on that. I want your help to solve this business problem. And so what you're doing is you're turning it into, well, if they can't say yes to something that they developed, Well, now you're not servicing the needs of the business. Why do you both work here? And so it turns into, you need to be, when a security department behaves like you've said, where they don't want to say yes to anything, they just say no to everything, they're playing checkers, you need to play chess. So play the more complex game. They think they're playing the game, but it's not the game that you're actually playing. So chess, not checkers is probably the best answer, and you just need to be a devious bastard. And the way you do that is by invoking the business problem you're solving, not the technical problem you're solving, right? Like the technical problem of how to, I don't know, partition your Kafka. No business person gives a wild, crazy butt about that. And security people will be the kind of people who are jerks about that because they can, even though they don't understand what the hell partitioning in Kafka is. All right, we're not talking about that. We're going to talk about the business problem of, I have these transaction records that I need to move through the application in a way that is optimized the best. I had my idea about how I should do it. I need your help to come up with a secure way to optimize this data flow, data stream through the application. Can you help me out? And then when they say no, you look at your boss and you say, I tried. Make sense?
Makes sense. Thank you.
Awesome.